Hi, I'm Amanda and welcome to Self. On this podcast, I share experiences, ideas, and have conversations to explore the self. My hope is that by developing our self-awareness, we can show up better for ourselves and for those around us so that we can all live happier and healthier lives. On today's episode, I am going to be talking about therapy, how I ended up there 10 and a half years ago, and a bit about what my journey's been like since going for the first time. Right, so let's get straight into it. I went to therapy for the first time 10 and a half years ago. And that was a result of not being able to manage conflict in a healthy way. And it was made very clear to me in my relationship at the time. My ex-husband is who I was dating. And also, side note, I've spoken to him about talking about our relationship on the podcast and he's okay with it. We've agreed on a pseudonym for him, so he'll go by DT. And yeah, so I've got his permission. He's someone who's played a massive role in my life and we're on good terms. So that's why I've spoken to him about it. But yeah, we were dating for a year, and in that year, we'd been through a lot. There was a lot of conflict, a lot of fighting. And prior to him, I'd been in a couple of other relationships where I also didn't know how to manage conflict in a healthy way. And to be perfectly honest, I was just acting out all the things that I'd watched through my childhood. And so a very unhealthy way of dealing with big emotions and not being able to communicate my feelings and expressing myself well anytime that I was upset, angry, frustrated. And so the way that would look is like I was yelling, a lot of yelling. I think I experienced like a lot of anger and quite uncontrollable rage. I remember it feeling really overwhelming, taking over my entire body, and just this feeling of it needing to be let out. And the only way that I knew how was to get big. And I would raise my voice, I would, yell, say things that I would regret, make threats. I know, lots of really, unhealthy things. And when DT and I were together, after that year, he ended the relationship. He was like, this is not the kind of relationship that I want to be in. It's not healthy. We have these fights. It's awful. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. That was kind of the first time that had been really addressed in that way. And it was a shock to the system. I was obviously devastated, spoke to my best friend. She recommended that I see a counsellor. And so I did. I got in and saw this wonderful woman. And that was the start of, what's been over the last 10 and a half years, a lot of different therapists and counsellors over certain periods of my life. So I go in to see her and we start unpacking and uncovering where all of this comes from. And what I shared with her was about that rage that I felt. And, I realized that for most of us walking around, when we react to things, it's a result of the way that we've been shaped and brought up. It's a result of all of these experiences coming together, and then we react, right? When we lack self-awareness, when we lack an understanding of how all of that has come about, and we just kind of give in to the reactions, we don't have an opportunity to properly respond, to thoughtfully respond. And that's what was happening for me. I had these unhealthy and toxic ways of managing conflict. I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I didn't even know exactly what it was that I was feeling, kind of the layers of different emotions, right? The first thing, the only thing I could recognize was just anger. But under all of that, under anger, was sadness or disappointment or a feeling of being let down, whatever it was. But because I wasn't aware of what was actually going on for me, I would just give in to the anger and react to that. And so going to see this therapist was a huge eye opener. You know, they say you don't know what you don't know, and that was the truth. I didn't know so much about myself. It gave me this incredible insight when we started reflecting on my childhood and talking about what conflict looked like in my house. And it's funny because as a kid, I hated watching my parents fight. I hated the yelling and the screaming. I hated when voices were raised. I hated being yelled at. All of these things were things that I didn't enjoy. And yet, the moment it came to conflict, I would react in the exact same way. That's just what would come out and play out. And so, that was very clearly my nervous system getting my sympathetic nervous system activating this fight, flight, fawn response. And for me, it was to fight, right? Like that was it. And through the first few months of counseling, it was honestly just us unpacking and recognizing where all of this came from. And it was this big and slow wake-up call, big, slow and painful wake-up call into, who I am. And through that, I was really able to then communicate better to DT. I was able to tell him, I guess, I was able to help him understand. First of all, I was able to understand myself. And then I was able to communicate that to him so that he could understand my experience and then communicate, my needs and make some requests on how we could, how I could support him and how he could support me better at the time of conflict. So something for me, I remember at the time, he just needed a break from when we're in the in the heat of conflict. He's someone who just, I guess, when it comes to flight or fight, he's flight, just needs to take a break, chill out. He doesn't want to say anything that he's going to regret. And here's me being no, let's fight it out. And so anytime when he just needed to take 5-10 minutes, whatever, I was interpreting that as him walking away from the relationship. So this feeling of abandonment. And again, that draws from stuff with my dad. It had ultimately nothing to do with him. It was just playing on childhood wounds. And so, then I could come and say, hey, this is where it comes from. And we could make some agreements on, all right, well, if you just need a timeout, communicate that and just say, hey, I'm not walking away from you or the relationship. I'm just taking a bit of a timeout. And that was something that was really helpful in me then being able to take that and go, all right, there's that information. And now I'm going to regulate my own emotions from there and kind of self-soothe. So that first stint of therapy I think I went for about 8 months, was the starting point for my journey on understanding who I am, understanding why I'm wired the way that I am, and where a lot of these reactions come from. And since then, it's funny because this, when I think back to that level of rage that I experienced, I don't experience that at all anymore. I can't remember the last time I felt that intense level, that uncontrollable level of rage, which is very, honestly, so different to just being angry. It was nuts. I can laugh about it now, but poor guy. Yeah, sorry. It was intense and just so overwhelming for me. But it's not something that I experience anymore. And I think that's because I've developed the tools over a lot of time, to regulate my own emotions, to be able to sit with big feelings and to not simply react, but to give myself time and space to respond a bit thoughtfully, to be able to uncover the layers of what's going on underneath the anger. And the more that I practiced doing that, the easier it was to actually get straight into those feelings rather than just looking at the surface and seeing the anger that was there. And, like a lot of the times under all of that is just a little child who's feeling sad or disappointed in some way. And being able to recognize that, I think, is pivotal in seeing yourself and understanding what it is that you're really feeling rather than just what might present at the surface. So, yeah, that was, I guess, that's the situation that landed me in counseling for the very first time. And it was a painful but liberating period of time. Understanding, learning, and uncovering all these layers of myself, understanding how my family, the role of my family, and how all of that played into it. And so that was the start of my journey in therapy. And it was quite, while it was painful to experience and to relive a lot of those traumatic memories, because it's stored in your body, right? Like trauma is it's not what you've been through, because we can go through, two individuals can go through the exact same thing and experience it completely different, come out of it completely different. It's very much how your body remembers it. It's what your nervous system hangs on to. And so when I went to therapy and we would talk about a lot of my childhood memories, they were very traumatic. I would feel everything that I felt as a child all over again. So it was a challenging and painful journey to go through, but absolutely a necessary one that ended up being very liberating for me. I think something so valuable from it all is insight and being able to be aware of what's actually going on. And so following kind of that period of 8 months, I stopped going. And after a few years, maybe a couple of years, I think I was back in for to process some other things that came up through work. And so through the years, I've kind of gone in and out of therapy depending on what season of my life I've been in and where I've felt I've needed a bit more support to process certain things or to gain insight on myself and on situations, on certain dynamics. It's just been incredibly helpful. I've been in, individual therapy, I've been in couples therapy, and I'm still seeing a counselor now. And it's just such a wonderful thing. And I hope that more people are open to going, if anything, just purely to be, being open-minded and just going to uncover the things that you don't know about yourself. And I recognize that can be a pretty scary thing. Sometimes, I guess ignorance is bliss, but I would actually say that knowledge is power. So for me, I'm a huge advocate of going to counseling or therapy and just understanding more about yourself. Because when we do, then we start to realize, oh, like this is why I react the way I do. This is why I show up the way that I do. This is why, you know, when someone does something like, hey, take a time out, which is a very fair and reasonable thing to ask for, I immediately get really defensive or angry, whatever it is. You know, it's just being able to understand ourselves is ultimately the greatest power that we can have, because then we actually have the power to respond and to show up in ways that we want to, rather than just react in the world. And I saw myself change slowly, not because I was like setting out to change in any way, but because then I was able to like reflect on things and go, hold on, this isn't what I want. I don't want to push people away when I deal with conflict in these unhealthy ways. I don't want to hurt people with my words. I don't want to say things that I'm going to regret. What I actually want is to be able to communicate clearly and in a healthy way. I want, you know, conflict is something that we can't avoid. I recognize that. I just didn't know how to manage it. And that's been a great tool that I've learned through various therapists through the years. Because I've had to go in, you know, when I've had work-related stuff, I've gone in and had great conversations with therapists about that. And, you know, when things have come up with my parents, I've gone and processed that. So just over the years, learning about myself to then unlearn old patterns and behaviors and learn new tools to put into practice, to then rewire my brain, to rewire my nervous system so that I can show up in the ways that I want to. And over the past, 10 and a half years, there have been times when I've gone to see therapists who I just haven't connected with. And I've heard from other friends who have gone to counseling for the first time and they're like, oh, I just didn't really feel it. And so I just stopped going. And if that's you, I encourage you to, you know, maybe try out a couple of different counselors. I remember one said to me, because I was very privileged to have this program offered through my workplace where we were given access to free counseling, and it's all, you know, private. They don't give your name out or anything. And the counselor's like, hey, you know, if you come and we don't connect, that's totally fine. Just let me know and you can save your session. You can ask to see someone else. It's not a problem. It's really important that when you go in, that you really connect with your counselor and that you feel that you can trust this person, you can open up to them for whatever reason. And I do think that sometimes, obviously, we can go in with a bit of hesitation and some reservations, and that's natural and normal. But I've had counselors who, straight away I've gone in and I'm like, there's something here and this is going to be good. And I've had others who I'm like, no, just for whatever reason, not feeling it. And I could feel myself kind of staying a bit more closed off. So I would encourage, if you've considered counseling or have in the past and, you know, have felt this, to just try some other ones. And if you are thinking about it, if you're thinking about going to therapy for whatever reason, and it feels scary, or it feels like, you know, there has to be something wrong, I just want to tell you that there doesn't have to be, right? Like, it's an opportunity for insight. It's an opportunity to uncover what you don't know about yourself. It's an opportunity for improvement, an opportunity for growth, or to learn new tools. Like I said, I have learned so much over the past 10 and a half years, and I'm still learning. You know, there are still conversations with my counselor now, and I'll share something that's happened for me, and I just gain such great insight. And through that, I've also been able to develop skills to better self-reflect so that, when other things are going on, I can sit with it and process it in a way that's much healthier than I've ever done before. And this whole journey, as we're going through life, is weird and wonderful. And I think there are just times when it can be really challenging and really hard. And we often don't know what to do with some emotions. Everyone processes things differently. But what I would ultimately encourage is, if it feels like a lot at any point, if it feels like, it's too much, or you have big emotions and you don't know what to do with them, then I do encourage you to speak to someone. My hope is that this stuff becomes way less taboo, and I think that it is. Most of my friends have gone to therapy at some point, and that's fantastic. I don't think anyone really comes out of seeing a therapist and going, I really gained nothing from that at all. I guess it's just something that's so valuable. It's been something so valuable for me, and I hope that everyone at some point, gets the opportunity to. I recognize that it can be quite expensive. It's a investment, and mental health is talked about a lot, but is an expensive resource. So hopefully you can find some government supported options or something if you're thinking of going to see someone. And I'd like to continue having this conversation a bit more, and go into this topic and perhaps explore a little bit more into, I guess the nitty-gritty side of it. Perhaps that's a conversation for a guest episode that I've been thinking of having. So I guess I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience, and I hope that you've learned something or gained something from this. Really, for me, this episode was just an opportunity to share my experience, and recognizing where I've come from and how I've grown in the past 10.5 years, and how much of a role that therapy's played in that. So thanks for listening. Sorry if I've been waffling. This was not, I don't script my episodes, but usually I do write down a few notes and stuff. But this was a bit of a, let's just go for it kind of episode. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. You can follow me on Instagram. You can send me comments, send me some feedback, some requests for episode topics. We're here to explore the self. Like I said, so anything related to self, I want to talk about. I want to find guests for. So if you have any requests, please let me know. You can reach out to me at self_podcast or at Amanda Letran, that's Letran, on Instagram. And you can watch this podcast on YouTube. You can listen anywhere you get your podcasts, and I would be super grateful if you could please leave a review, comment, share with your friends, family, whoever. And I hope to see you next week. I release episodes every Thursday, so I'll see you then. Thank you and goodbye.